Okay, Mayor, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Citrus Heights City Council for Thursday, April 22nd, 2021 to order. And with that, will you all join me in saluting our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, Clerk Fan, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bruins,
Present.
Councilmember Daniels,
Here.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Here.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Present.
and Mayor Miller.
Here.
This meeting of the Citrus Heights City Council is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. This meeting is closed captioned and live streamed at citrusheights.net. Tonight's meeting replays on Monday, April 26th at 9 a.m. on Channel 14. This meeting can also be viewed on the City of Citrus Heights YouTube channel.
Thank you. And with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve our agenda for tonight.
Move approval. So moved.
Okay, I have a motion from Vice
Second.
Mayor Middleton, second from Councilmember Bruins. All those, well, I can't do that. We have to call roll, please.
Councilmember Bruins,
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Aye.
and Mayor Miller.
Aye.
The next item that we have tonight is presentations. The first presentation, number 4, is a proclamation of the City of Citrus Heights proclaiming April as Donate Life Month. And tonight we have joining us virtually is Christian Sutton on behalf of the Sierra Donor Services, and he will be accepting the proclamation virtually.
Very good. Let me first read the proclamation and then we'll present it. Whereas nearly 110,000 Americans are currently on the organ donation list waiting, including over 21,000 Californians, and whereas 95% of Americans believe organ, eye, and tissue donation is the right thing to do, yet approximately 50% nationally and 37% in California are actually registered to become donors. Whereas Sierra Donor Services serves as a center of a dynamic, interconnected system that involves donor families, local hospitals, and transplant centers across Northern California in the delicate and time-sensitive mission of saving lives through transplant. Whereas in 2020, even in the midst of a global pandemic, Sierra Donor Services had the most successful year in nearly their 40-year history, making 396 organ transplants possible thanks to the selfless generosity of 139 Northern California organ donors. And whereas increasing the number of registered organ, eye, and tissue donors is a benefit to all Californians and provides more life-saving opportunities across the state and nation. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Citrus Heights does hereby proclaim April as Donate Life Month throughout the City of Citrus Heights. And it's witnessed by my signature and attested by our clerk, Amy Van. And with that, I would welcome comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Miller, and your office. Thank you, Haley, for coordinating this with me. And thank you for your continued service to the City of Citrus Heights. I accept this proclamation on behalf of Sierra Donor Services so that we can be a resource for the city. The work I am passionate about today started when I received a heart transplant at the age of 2. In fact, the greatest hero I have never met was my heart donor, a 3-year-old.
Oh, wow.
The donor family's decision to donate gave me a chance to grow up. I graduated high school valedictorian, I'm now a graduating senior at California State University, Fullerton with summa cum laude honors, and I lived my dream internship on the Disney College program. This proclamation is so important because it encourages people to register as a donor hero, and it signals to citizens the need for registration. Registering as an organ donor takes seconds, but it could mean years of life for someone else, as it has for me. With my second chance at life, I'm here to encourage you and our community to be that second chance at life for someone else. There is a quote attributed to Pablo Picasso that says, "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. The point is to give, and if possible, to give of yourself." Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I apologize. I didn't catch your name.
My name is Christian Sutton.
Christian, your story gave me goosebumps. It's very heartwarming. And I'm so glad someone was able to give you the gift of life. That is just an incredible story you just told us. And it's all the reason why I have that red dot on my driver's license. I don't know if anybody can use my eyes or anything. I think I've worn my heart out, but it's still there in case. I know I have a niece that's in need of a kidney and she's waiting. They thought they had a match and it didn't happen, but I'm well aware. It's just to hear your story is just incredible. Thank you. And if there's anybody else who'd like to comment, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Well, I'll just say a couple words. Christian, thank you for joining us tonight. I just want to applaud you for not only taking this heart and accepting it and growing up to be a fine man, but also to give part of your life back to the cause so that others can benefit from it as well. So thank you tonight. I'm really honored that we were able to issue this proclamation and that you're there to accept it. Thank you.
Christian, this is Council Member Tim Schaefer. Again, I'm also an organ donor. I believe in the program. Thank you very much for raising awareness for this worthy cause. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your stories, and thank you for sharing your decision to register, because that affirmation and having those conversations with our community, our citizens, even our own family members and loved ones is so important, so that we can help to be not only be a resource, but mitigate some disparities and educate the community about the importance of donations. So thank you for having me here.
You're welcome, Christian. Thank you. We'll see you next year, okay?
I'm looking forward to it.
Let's do it. Okay, thank you. And with that, we're going to move on to the next item. Take care, Christian.
Next item is presentation number 5, a proclamation of the City of Citrus Heights proclaiming April as Fair Housing Month.
Good evening, Mayor Miller, Council. My name is Stephanie Cotter, and I'm with the Community Development Department. Tonight's Fair Housing presentation is to commemorate the National Fair Housing Act, which we commemorate each April. It was passed in 1968. And with me tonight is Olga Tulaiden from Sacramento Self-Help Housing. She's the Renters Helpline Manager, and she's going to provide a brief presentation about the city's partnership with Sacramento Self-Help Housing and how we work with other local jurisdictions in addition to Sacramento Self-Help Housing to affirmatively further fair housing in the Sacramento region. And then after that, we have a proclamation prepared for City Council to read. So with that, I will turn it over to Olga.
Very good. Welcome, Olga.
Can everyone see my share screen? Okay, so good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Olga Tulaiden, and I am Renters Helpline Supervisor. And I am so pleased to be here today and represent on behalf of Sacramento Self-Help Housing. City of Citrus Heights is one of our valued funders, and I would like to take a moment to express my gratitude and appreciation for all your support and giving us opportunity to continue serving the people of Citrus Heights. Renters Helpline since 2014 is dedicated to protecting the rights of renters and landlords and promoting fair housing. Renters Helpline offer tenant-landlord dispute resolutions, and we do educate both tenants and landlords on their rights and responsibilities. Also, we do provide multi-language line services and referrals as needed. We also do work with Project Sentinel, and all our cases due to discrimination, they're taking over and they're doing the further investigations on it. Each year we increase our yearly goal and successfully achieve them. On this slide, you can see the comparison of goals in red versus total in blue for the last fiscal year for each jurisdictions we serve. On this slide, it's a little bit of stats for 2019 through 2020. And the year of 2020 was a challenge for all of us, especially for tenants who lost their job and were not able to pay for rent. Renters Helpline staff were able to guide all those tenants and landlords on new laws and moratoriums due to COVID-19. And we were able to refer them to proper sources to get financial help. In the last fiscal year, we helped 411 clients in Citrus Heights and over 9,000 throughout Greater Sacramento County. Over a year ago, more bills were passed regarding tenants protection. And the Senate Bill 329 was passed, and as of January 1st, 2020, it is illegal for landlords to deny housing for Section 8 participant. Here is one of the examples that we had in Citrus Heights. One of the tenants called Renters Helpline and was referred to Project Sentinel. Project Sentinel opened the case based on a tenant's complaint that housing complex was not accepting housing choice vouchers. The tenant previously rented her unit at market rate. She received the housing vouchers and requested landlord to accept the housing vouchers. Of course, landlord denied it. Then Project Sentinel was involved, sent a letter to the landlord and educated the landlord on new laws and rules regarding Section 8 protections, and landlord accepted the housing choice voucher. So this is one of our success story, example of one of our success story. And again, I would like to thank all of you for your support. It is truly our honor to continue serving the people of Sacramento, of Citrus Heights, and we committed to keep up promoting fair housing because everyone deserves to have their dream house. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. And I'd like to ask Vice Mayor Portia Middleton to present the proclamation tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. I will read this in brief. Whereas Fair Housing Month is celebrated each April across the United States to commemorate this enactment of the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. And whereas the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of dwellings and in other housing-related transactions based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. And whereas the city of Citrus Heights affirms that every American in choosing where they want to live has a right to live in dignity and safety and without fear of discrimination, and that the city supports state and federal protections against discrimination in the sale and rental of housing. And whereas the city of Citrus Heights is proud of its commitment to fair housing while recognizing the need to affirmatively further fair housing in its policies and practices, and is committed to continuing to work to identify and remove impediments to fair housing choices. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council and the City of Citrus Heights does hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Fair Housing Month and confirms its commitment to ensure that there's equal access to housing for every member in our community.
Thank you. We'll make sure get a copy over to Olga so she can display it in a prominent location at the Sacramento Fair.
Thank you so much. It's truly our honor to serve Citrus Heights people. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks again. And with that, we'll move on to the next item.
Next item is comments by council members and regional board updates.
Okay, let's see. Councilmember Daniels, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you very much. Just real quick, board meeting today. The main thing that came out of it is that we did pretty much finalize the proposed budget, 63.5 million, I think, and it will come back next month for a final vote at the end of May. The remarkable thing about it, it didn't change too much from the previous year so much, but we got hit with a unanticipated 50% increase in workers' comp and liability insurance. And so I'm not sure what's going on with that. And I hope we don't see that somehow coming into local government and our city. So not sure, they weren't quite sure what happened and are doing some shopping, but hopefully it's not something that will creep its way into local governments. And the only other thing is Green Acres is open. Parking lot was jam-packed full when I went by earlier. And so get out there at San Juan and Greenback and get your garden and yard needs and all of that. And we're lucky to get Green Acres. It's a jewel for Citrus Heights. And so please support it. That's it.
Sorry, I was muted. Councilmember Schaefer, you want to update us next?
Thank you, Mayor.
You're
So I want to take a moment to wish everyone a happy Earth Day. The library board met today. I'm delighted to announce there was lots of business there, but delighted to announce that this summer, the Sacramento Public Library will be accepting delivery of 2 fully electric bookmobiles this summer. That is in the light of going to all electric vehicles. These will be trucks that will be powered fully electric. So I'm very excited about that. Also, earlier this week, I was contacted by a high school senior. His name is Jeffrey Muller. He's a senior at Cornerstone Christian School. He's actually a Roseville resident, but he wanted to know what it was like to sit on the city council. So we had a really interesting discussion, and I really look forward to this young man. He's super bright and wants to go into government, and I encouraged him. I think he'd make a great addition to the city staff somewhere, or even elected office. So I would certainly encourage you, Jeffrey, to pursue your dreams. And it was a delight to speak with you. So that's really all I had. Again, it is in the middle of Ramadan right now, so Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you. Councilmember Bruins.
Thank you, Mayor. So Regional San and Sacramento Area Sewer District met last week by Zoom. And this is the time of year where everybody's talking about budgets. And so we had a budget workshop for each of the districts. And the good news is that there will be no increases. We don't foresee any increases in the near future at all from SASD as well as from Regional San. And SASD has been level, their rates have been level for the last 10 years. And that's just a testimony to the good stewardship that the Regional San and SASD exhibits as they do their business. And then today I received an email from our district engineer, Prabhakar Samavarapu, and he sent email out to the board and to key staff to announce that in the nearly 50-year history of Regional San, there have been a number of notable accomplishments, starting with the establishment of the district in 1973, the opening of the wastewater treatment plant in 1982, which consolidated 22 smaller wastewater treatment plants, and other achievements after that as well. And this week we achieved another very large achievement, and he's retiring later this year. So I was so pleased for him that this was done before he left the district. And as you know, we've been in the process of doing this big Echo Water project out at the treatment plant. And this week we turned over from what they call the heart of the plant, which is the BNR, which is the biological nutrient removal process, and got turned over to the new heart of the plant. And what that means to the region and to the environment is that we now no longer discharge 30,000 pounds of ammonia per day into the Sacramento River. And so that's a big accomplishment for the district. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is that I spoke with a representative from the consulting company that's working with Sacramento Fire. They are reaching out. Several of you may have already spoken with them. They're doing a community risk analysis for fire, and I gave them my thoughts on that. And they are also going to be reaching out to the public. So some of you may hear from them, and I encourage you to give your input about what you think the greatest risks for fire in citrus heights are. And with that, I will say good evening. I'm done.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Oh, I'm not done with the meeting. I'm done with my announcements.
Okay,
I'll stick
you're not going
around.
home yet. Thank you. And with
I am
that,
home.
all right, Vice Mayor Middleton, what have you been up to?
Okay, busy 2 weeks. So Cal City Sacramento Valley chapter met, and we have nothing really to report there. We reviewed some of the housing bills in the housing committee at the state level about affordable housing and the impact that's going to have on local governments. And we took a couple of preliminary positions on several bills. I attended the chamber luncheon. I got to hear Barry Broom speak about bringing business to Sacramento and how he felt this post-pandemic and how we're going to recover out of all this as a region. I attended the POW board meeting. We had a lot of updates there. We're going to be sponsoring a golf tournament with Rotary. And I also attended the POW fundraiser Roadhouse dinner fundraiser, which was a lot of fun. Former Mayor Sloey was there, and he got to hear my outdoor voice, which I don't think he actually knew I had one. At SACOG, very exciting news. We approved our old Auburn Boulevard and Auburn Boulevard projects, so they're fully funded, and looking forward to seeing what kind of exciting things that's going to bring for us there. And that is all.
All right, thank you. And just real quick on my week, it's been transit related. Monday night, we had a regional transit meeting. Of note was we voted to annex Elk Grove into the regional transit district. And the Elk Grove City Council followed up just like we did a couple of years ago and voted to approve that annexation. Now, this means that all the agencies, the cities and county that make up regional transit are now full members. There's no contract cities. This will help RT in getting federal grants. It makes them more consistent and powerful in the region. And I think there may be some more expansion of that regional transit. Again, this is only conjecture at this point, but we seem to be headed finally down the right track with regional transit. Recently got approved for funding for some low floor light rail trains, and those are being built by Siemens here in Sacramento. The other transit related was the Capital Corridor JPA. That's the train that runs from Sacramento to San Jose. Correct myself. There are 2 trips, I believe, from Roseville to San Jose. And that service has been cut because of COVID. We're seeing an increase in ridership. It's coming back, and we voted to increase the train service on June 1st, almost back to the levels that we were at before. So that's good news as the region and the state and the country open back up. So those are good signs. The other interesting discussion, it really didn't affect us folks up here in Sacramento, but is the Oakland A's new proposed stadium. And there's some issues I think that came up, and it was a rather interesting discussion to hear some of the Bay Area folks talk about it. The 2 main rail lines run between the waterfront stadium they're proposing and the rest of Oakland. Every fan would have to cross 2 tracks of freight trains, not light rail, Capital Corridor, and it doesn't seem to be being addressed. And Again, if you're an Oakland A's fan from Sacramento, that'd be perfect to have the train drop you off right at the stadium. But I think they need to do some more accommodations to make that viable for the next 50 years. So that was the discussion we had, and that's all I have for tonight. So we will move on to the rest of the meeting. Amy, would you please call the next item?
The next item is public comment, and let me just bring up here. Members of the public may address the council on any item of interest to the public and within the council's purview, or on any agenda item before or during the council's consideration of the item. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. If you wish to address the council during the Zoom meeting, please use the raise hand function or *9 from a telephone to indicate your desire to speak. When your name is called, the city clerk will allow you to unmute your microphone and speak. I do have a couple of written comments, but I'll go ahead and see if on Zoom we have any raised hands from the members of the public, if any wish to speak.
And if anybody's here to speak on item 8 or 9, I'm sorry, the budget approval, I will be asking for public comment during that item as well.
Okay, I do have one raised hand from Robert Wickert. And you are now able to unmute your microphone and speak.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Wickert. I've lived in Citrus Heights for about 20 years with my wife, Sally. And for full disclosure, I'm also a member of the Sacramento Suburban Water District Board of Directors. So I'm familiar with governmental budgets. I'm not making this comment for Sac Suburban. This is just my comment tonight. So I want to be clear about that. But I do want to reflect on the fact that we struggled at Sac Suburban keeping our rates low. And to do that, we have to keep our budget low. We have a 2021 goal of a 10% cut in our administrative budget. So I'm here tonight to remark that I think perhaps Citrus Heights is in a similar situation. And I'm recommending that as you move forward to deal with your budget and your taxes, that you keep in mind that your customers, that's your taxpayers, may not be able to bear the tax costs that you impose upon them. We struggled with that at Sac Suburban, and we just can't continuously raise rates. It doesn't work. At some point, people can't afford to pay them. So we've discussed keeping resources and the incomes of our customers in mind when we consider our rates. And I'm recommending you do the same thing, that when you consider your taxes, you keep in mind the resources and the income of your taxpayers so that you don't exceed their ability to pay. That's really all I have right now, but I would like to talk on number 9 when we get to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Any other raised hands, Amy?
I do not see any other raised hands at this time. I do have a couple of written comments that I will go ahead and read at this time. The first public comment is from David Warren. It is patently inappropriate for the budget proposal to be considered or approved at this meeting because 1, the council's time limitation for individual public comment makes it absolutely necessary that the city schedule public hearings for individual portions of the budget, i.e. public safety, street maintenance, repairs, employee wages, etc., to allow the public adequate time to address budget subparts. 2, the budget document fails to identify with specificity proposed wage and staff changes, instead addressing such items in generalities. 3, the city manager failed to include American Rescue Plan Act funds, which Congress Ami Bera assured the city would receive. And 4, the 6 days since the budget was posted online has been insufficient for members of the community, such as myself, to prepare written comments for council members to consider. The draconian department reductions, especially for the CHPD, when the immediate future portends police service increase in demand as a consequence of the inevitable increase in homeless individuals when mortgage payment and rent relief ends, is unnecessary, and that money will arrive soon to backfill the impending budget deficit. when both our mayor and police chief make television statements describing police staff reductions, it is an invitation to criminals to come to Citrus Heights. The council should reject the proposed budget until the council sitting en banc and provides all of us adequate time to comment both orally and in writing, followed by sufficient time for the council to take into consideration the public comments. The next public comment I have is from Marta Platt. She states, the homeowners of 778 Perdez Court continue to threaten the livelihood and the safety of the residents of Perdez Court and the surrounding neighborhood. It is ridiculous that the residents have to continually call CHPD dispatch regarding these homeowners and submit numerous reports. As of this date, CHPD has provided unacceptable excuses as to why no action has been taken and has neglected to provide appropriate resolutions to address the ongoing safety issue. The residents of the court continue to be concerned for their personal safety and their property. A few residents are elderly and one resident lives alone. Everyone in the court deserves to feel safe in their own home and to freely leave and return to their respective homes at will. We all expect to have a safe and peaceful environment, as it has been for many years. Thank you for your consideration. And the last public comment that I have is from Tanny Carroll. Good evening. We have a neighbor that has been a problem to our court for a year. The Citrus Heights PD has done everything they can. As our video camera doesn't show exact evidence of crimes, we believe there is drug selling happening. We know there is drug use. There are now dozens of very filthy and aggressive strangers hanging out at this man's house, sometimes being verbally offensive to our other neighbors. It appears to be a flop house for druggies and transients. The property is filthy with a sofa and oven in the front, bags and bags of what appears to be garbage. Sometimes a person on a bike picks up a bag and rides off. We are frustrated. We are hoping for next level help. Thank you. That is the last. And I do see that I have an additional raised hand from a telephone caller ending in 7640. So if you're on the phone number 7640, you are now able to unmute yourself and speak. If you can state your name.
Yes, my name is Arthur Ketterling, and I was wanting to find out what tier we're in at the moment of as far as with our so we can get back together, and when can we open up again so we can be there at the council chambers again. I was wanting to find that out if you happen to have any updates on that.
Arthur, I believe we're still in the red tier, and I have not heard any updates. All I can tell you is it'll be soon. At the latest, June 15th. I'm hearing, and again, that could change, but I'm hearing from the governor that he's going to completely open the state June 15th. Whether or not that happens, I do not know. But we're seeing things open up, and slowly but surely, we will go back to live meetings. I can't wait.
I can't either. And I just want to ask one other question. Mrs. Middleton was mentioning about getting funds for the Auburn Boulevard area. And do you know, like, when I know it may be a while yet, but do you know when that would be starting?
So we don't know exactly when that'll be starting, but we'll be going through the process of transferring funds within, I don't know, towards the end of the year.
Towards the end of the year? Well, that's just approximately. I thank you, Ms. Middleton, very much. And thank you, Mayor, very much too.
You're welcome, Arthur. Thank you for your comments.
All right.
Okay. I think that wraps up public comment. Again, I will be opening public comment, well, on any item really that we cover, but just want to remind if you wanted to make further comments on the budget, item 9 will be coming up soon. And with that, next item, please.
Next item is consent calendar items 6, 7, and 8.
Any items council members want pulled? If not,
I
I'd
move
entertain a
approval.
motion.
Yeah.
Motion by Bruins, second by Middleton. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bruins,
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Aye.
and Mayor Miller.
Aye. And with that, the consent calendar passes. Please call the next item.
Next item, regular calendar, item number 9. The subject is approval of budget for fiscal years 21-22 and 22-23, and authorization for execution of an agreement with Greater Sacramento Economic Council. The recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the 2-year budget for fiscal years 21-22 and 22-23, and adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement between the Greater Sacramento Economic Council and the City of Citrus Heights in an amount not to exceed $35,238 for fiscal year 21-22.
All right, thank you. Well, good evening, council. My name is Chris Boyd. I'm the city manager. It's staff's pleasure tonight to make a final presentation for the council's consideration to adopt the 2-year budget for fiscal years 21-22 and 22-23. It's unfortunate that this budget is reduced. I want to thank the staff and the council for all the work that they have put into the work of finding the best strategies and making the best decisions for the services for our community. We think we've done that. This budget is balanced operationally. But at the same time, I do want to comment that the budget will show you, does not and is not able to fund, when we look out for a long-term forecast, a number of, substantially important items, namely our streets repair and resurfacing. Now, we've talked about this a number of times now. We've had 2 public council workshops, a 2x2 session, finance committee of the council to get us here tonight. We've appreciated all the guidance from the council to get us here. But looking forward, what is important to note is although we have taken the necessary steps to bring our expenses in line with our projected revenues moving forward, but there are still unresolved issues moving forward that the council and I and the city as a whole do need to address and have solutions for. And as I mentioned, namely roads. We've come to the council and shown detailed analysis that we need about $12 million a year over about a 10-year period to improve our roads. A minimum of about $7.4 million a year just to maintain them the way they are today. This budget does not have those funds contained in there, and the solution, a revenue solution there remains unresolved on how we're going to do that. Before we show just a brief presentation, final presentation, I also want to comment on the American Rescue Act. This has been welcome news from the federal government. The city, we are told, is slated over a 2-year period to receive somewhere around the $16 million amount, maybe slightly less, paid over 2 years. But as we sit here, we don't know today what we can use that money for and what the restrictions are. The federal government has told us that we will receive guidance from the Department of Treasury in May. And we're hoping for good news that is directly attributable to resolving our current budget deficits and our problems in that regard. Staff spends quite a bit of time in nationwide and statewide webinars and informational sessions. We have a little bit of information. Most of it that we're hearing so far, although preliminary, does not go directly to our specific issue. For example, we're hearing thus far that we may not be able to use this money for roads. We may not be able to use this money for debt. And as we know, it is one-time funding. So our operational issues going forward, are for long-term. So it would have limited impact for us on our general fund, reduced staffing and related services, and that we would be back in the same issue in 2 years. So we're waiting, like every city in the United States is waiting. This money goes to all cities. And so what we've told the council, and we'll say again tonight, is we're hoping for impactful news on that money. And as we get that news, we'll bring it to the council, and the council can decide. We can do budget amendments moving forward and adjust as we need to. So with that, those are my opening comments. Again, I want to thank the staff and thank the council for all the work and the public hearings and the input that we've had thus far. So it'll be quite brief right now. So with that, I'll turn it over to the director of our Administrative Services Department over Finance, Mr. Bill Zanoni. So Bill.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Bill Zanoni, the Interim Administrative Services Director. Amy, if we could go to the next slide. The process for this budget, the budget review process, actually began in January of this year. On January 28th, the City Council received a financial update, which included the status report on the current year, fiscal year 2021 budget, preliminary projections for the next 2-year budget cycle, as well as a review of the 10-year financial forecast as of that date. The proposed budget for the next 2 fiscal years was presented to the Finance and Administration Committee on March 25th. And I think we spent a fair amount of time walking through the budget in detail at that meeting. And then on April 8th, the City Council conducted a budget workshop where the council received information from each of the city departments on their goals and accomplishments, as well as information on revenues and expenditures for the city's general fund and the other city funds. And then this evening, what we have before you is a recommendation for action to adopt the budget. So we could go to the next slide. As we discussed at the workshop 2 weeks ago, the total proposed budget for all city funds totals $72.7 million next fiscal year and $67.9 million in fiscal year 22-23. This includes the general fund, which we'll talk about in just a minute, as well as the city's solid waste enterprise fund. The city has 19 special revenue funds with budgets totaling $17.2 million and $14.7 million over the next 2 years. Most of these funds, special revenue funds, receive their revenue from state and federal sources. And then the city has 5 capital funds, which is where the city's capital projects and major capital purchases are budgeted. We could go to the next slide, please. As we've discussed previously, the city's main operating fund is the general fund. The general fund budget for next fiscal year anticipates revenue of $38.9 million to fund expenditures of just slightly over $39 million, with a projected need to utilize about $77,000 of reserves next year. For the second year of this 2-year budget cycle, the proposed budget projects revenue of $40.4 million and expenditures of 36.7. And in fiscal year 22-23, we anticipate about $3.6 million going back to replenish the city's reserve funds, which, as we discussed at the budget workshop, our reserve funds and our cash within those reserve funds are at a very low level right now. As the city manager mentioned, and as we also discussed at the workshop, this budget does not include any federal funds which the city might receive from the American Rescue Plan Act. We are still waiting for notification. Everyone is still waiting for notification of the amount of funding that the city will receive, and just as importantly, for guidance on what those funds may be used for. The preliminary estimate of the amount that the city may receive is $15.9 million. The written documents that have been provided so far are that there are very restrictive uses for those funds, although that has not yet been clarified. The restricted uses are that it can be used only, at least, and again, this is preliminary, but what we've seen from all of the webinars we've been to, for revenue replacement to the extent that reduction in revenue due to COVID, for COVID expenditures, COVID or negative economic impacts within our jurisdiction, premium pay for essential workers, and investments in water, sewer, and broadband. At this point, there is no mention of streets and roads. So if we could go to the next slide. So the requested action this evening is for the City Council to adopt 2 resolutions. The first resolution would approve the budget for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23. And as we indicated at the workshop, it would be our intent to return to council at such time as we receive information on exactly how much money the city will receive from the federal relief funds. And once we are advised on what we can spend those funds on, and then a second resolution authorizing an agreement for fiscal year 22-23 with Greater Sacramento Economic Council. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Before I go to the council for questions or comments, I'd like to ask for public comments, if that's okay. Amy, do we have any public comments?
I do see one raised hand from Robert Wickert. You can now unmute and speak for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I won't need 3 minutes. I am disappointed that the city council has decided to cut public safety funding. I'm disappointed because that's really supposed to be the last place you cut. You cut public safety funding, response times go up, crime goes up, and public safety goes down. The city council lives in Citrus Heights. Y'all know what I'm saying is true, but you've still decided to cut public safety funding, and I am extremely disappointed about that. And I am urging you to reconsider. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
Yes, I have one other comment with the screen name AJ Fox 5. So if you could just tell us your name, and you can now unmute your microphone and speak.
Good evening, council members. This is Albert Fox calling. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the budget proposal that I did see posted. I thought it was very accurate and up to date with what the information as it has been on the city website and that has been put out for public consumption. I would like to say also that there's always been this talk about cutting budgets here, cutting executive staff, cutting other people's salary. I don't know how many people on the city council have lived through those things, but I have. Number one, they're always a failure. And number two, you never do get back to where you've got a working operational capital within the 3 to 5 years that they say you're going to. One of the issues I do want to bring up, because it keeps being brought out, and I'm glad we didn't have to go there, but if you're going to start cutting people's salary, I think one of the things the city council needs to look at, number one, is cut your own. You get a stipend and you get health benefits. Cut it. Give it back to the city. It was just published how much money that was a year. That would keep a city employee employed over a year's period of time, if that's what your thought process is. But I'd like to see the commitment to balancing the budget by the council members, as well as by laying it off on current employees who are working hard to keep the city afloat. But in terms of the budgets there now, I like it. I don't agree that, I can't say I don't agree. I wish we didn't have to make the cuts some of the places we do, but having heard the dialogue and heard the discussions, I think that the budget is as fair as we can possibly make it, given the results of where we are today. Thank you.
And Mayor, I do not see any other raised hands at this time.
Thank you. Any other, does council have questions for Mr. Zanoni?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Daniels.
Thank you very much. Just a clarification on, there was a mention that, excuse me, that the funds would likely be able to be used for COVID-related cost, I believe it is, that the city have incurred and some other things. Have we tried to quantify those and see how much money that those items include yet?
Yes, at this point on our, as far as COVID-related costs, we have submitted those costs to FEMA, and Tammy Nasardi, our finance manager, I think as we discussed 2 weeks ago, is working closely with FEMA. I actually had dialogue with them today. The majority of that is for the Great Plates program, and we anticipate receiving those funds back from FEMA. As far as lost revenues related to COVID, it's not clear yet if we can look at individual line items as far as lost revenues, or if we have to look at the bottom line. The areas where we think we've lost revenues to COVID in the general fund, just based on my review, I would estimate that it looks like it's about $800,000 to $900,000. The largest portion of that is in community center rental. So if they will allow us to go line by line through our revenue budget, I believe we may be able to identify not more than $1 million in individual line items. If we have to look at our bottom line, the number would be much, much less than that because we have seen increases in other line items in the revenue side of the budget.
Thank you. And so possibly, maybe somewhere up near $1 million, hopefully. And then would it also include the ability for the city to say that based on the closures of restaurants and businesses and whatnot, and the downturn of the sales tax that we've been able to collect during that time frame, to be able to show that that was also COVID related? Is that something that we might be able to look to be reimbursed, for lack of a better word?
Well, overall, our sales tax has not dropped due to COVID. Overall, what we've seen on a reduction from sales tax revenue generated from our local businesses has been made up by sales tax generated from online sales. So there's not a large dollar amount there. We've seen that the webinars that we've been on with other cities, that's a fairly common occurrence with that the online sales picked up and made up for a good portion of what was lost due to retail closures.
I would find it remarkable to accept that with the closures of restaurants, and we're a very heavy community for restaurants, that we didn't get negatively impacted in there somehow.
A lot of while restaurants, eat-in restaurants closed, at least for a while, fast food restaurants did not, and their business picked up. So I'd be happy to, we've got the documents they'd be happy to show you that, but that's what it appears, at least at this point.
Very good. And then just so we're clear, tonight, we're being asked to adopt a resolution that includes more than a couple of dozen cuts to the police, while on the same budget item, we're being asked to hand over $35,000 to an organization outside of the city. That's remarkable. I guess it's not a question. I just don't even understand why we would even entertain pushing out money. And even though that's a very good organization and it does help us in the end, but we've also done that, I think, already with some funding, with anticipation of the dollars that are coming in on the rescue plan. That's all the questions I have for now, and I'll wait for comments until other questions are completed.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
So the city has been incorporated in 1997. This might be beyond Mr. Zanoni's experience as far as his tenure with the city, but I'd like to know, can anybody answer the question, what year did we spend $12 million on road repairs or filling potholes?
It's hard to understand your question. The $12 million is the outside assessment that Public Works has had done that we've showed to the council on a couple of occasions of our current road repair and resurfacing needs going forward.
That's what you're saying, though, is what we need to spend.
Can I answer that real quick, Tim?
Sure, absolutely.
It was probably 10 years ago. We had an estimate of about 80 million to keep the roads, improve the roads, and that has only gone up every year. So we've had estimates. It's just,
I'm not talking about estimates. I'm talking about what we spent when we had $30 million in reserves. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking, okay, so we need to allocate money for roads, but what did we do 10 years ago? What did we do 15 years ago?
We widened
we were more
Greenback from
flush?
city limit to city limit. We put 3 lanes of
We
highway
spend
in.
$12 million? Did we spend $7.5 million? Did we? If we did,
Mayor, if I
what
may.
year was it?
Oh, go ahead.
Councilmember Schaefer, if we really want to go back through and go line by line through the history of the budget of Citrus Heights, I don't think that now is the appropriate time to have done that. We've had plenty of budget workshops where we've done this. We have seen the roads improve throughout Citrus Heights. We've received funding. We've put that funding to work. We've coupled it with, grants and meeting, matching grants and all these things. There's a whole history that goes behind this that we can't spend the next several hours going through line by line about how we've repaved our road or used tax dollars to improve our neighborhood roads. It's this right now, that's not appropriate.
And I will say, when we first became a city, and Brett was on the council back then, so he may have more history on this, but there was a goal to repave our roads 20% each year. So in 5 years, all our roads would be repaved. That program lasted, I believe, 2 years before we couldn't afford it. The price was going up so high on asphalt so fast that even that plan failed. So we can go back and open the history books, but we are where we are, and it isn't for a lack of trying.
Well, just to add to that too, because it's always been a challenge to have our roads addressed, and the longer a road goes without being repaired, the more it's going to cost to repair it in the future. So I concur with the remarks that have been made by Council Member or Vice Mayor Middleton and Mayor Miller. We need to move forward. This is what we have today, and this is what we have to address today. So in regard to roads, those are my comments.
So I'd like to certainly finish my thoughts here, and that is what I'd like to look at is, I want to know more specifically to a much finer detail, what kind of money, if this is $15 million and we're getting $8 million by, according to the congressman, we're getting $8 million by May 11th. I would like to postpone this vote until after we've received the money and we can review the budget. It's only 2 weeks. I don't understand why we actually have to pass this right now.
When the CARES Act passed, Tim, they said it'd be 2 weeks and we'd have our instructions. It's now, how many months later? We have to have a budget in place to function July 1st. If we wait for the federal government, there's a possibility, and then find out that we don't qualify for any of the money that it needs to go to other organizations like nonprofits and stuff like that. And then we're left holding the bag. We need to put a budget in place and move forward. And once we see if we qualify for anything, if it's not just something that we're handing out to nonprofits to help homeless and help renters and help small businesses, which I'm in favor of, but it may not help us. So that's the quandary we're in right now. And we've always put a budget together on time and balanced, and this is as close as we're going to get. It's tight this year, and it's only going to get tighter. So
we have 68 days. 2 weeks, 14 days of that is not going to make. We may have more information in 14 days at our next council meeting. And I would prefer to postpone the vote until May 13th.
Mayor, I have some comments.
Any other questions before we go to comments? I think Brett, we did go into comments here, but I just wanted to see if there's any questions for staff before we wrap up. Any others? I did have one. Please bear with me. Bill, you mentioned retroactive pay, or no, you didn't mention if it was retroactive. You mentioned hazard pay, and my question is, are they talking retroactive or moving forward? I don't quite understand.
I believe they're talking going forward. It's not hazard, but they're calling it premium pay for essential workers. So it would be an add-on to salary of existing workers of up to $13 an hour, but it's not clear exactly who that would apply to and how we would administer it. But it's not. I do not believe it's retroactive.
So we'll wait for clarification on that. All righty. Any other questions? If not, we can move into discussion and then entertain a motion at any point.
I have some comments.
Go ahead, Brett.
You know, a budget is simply, it's just a projection of what we're going to receive. There's no guarantee, you know, with the budget that we're looking at tonight, there's no guarantee that we're going to have the dollars that we're projecting to include in that budget. Some of it might be a rollover, some of it might be somewhat of a guarantee, but most of it is just kind of a logical pattern of progression that from monies that we typically get. So it's just it's a projection, and you have the American Rescue Plan. It's a law. I mean, it literally assures us that we are going to receive approximately $16 million with approximately $8 million coming in the next 2 weeks or so. And logically, we will be allowed to use those funds for our needs, just as Congressman Barra stated when he was here about 2 weeks ago. And what it all comes down to at the end might be a little tighter, but you know, I feel like the congressman assured us that we're going to have little restrictions on it as to what we can do with it. And a budget with the American Rescue Plan in it, included in it, can be amended. Just like the city manager said, if we did this budget tonight without those dollars, we can come back and amend it later with those dollars. Doing it this way is going to do what it did, and that is create fear in the community. Social media is on fire right now regarding Citrus Heights and the comments that have been made regarding this budget, the televised interviews, the newspaper stuff. The comments are off the chart negative, and it's not necessary. And I think the best thing that we could do is kind of put the brakes on a little bit and maybe wait those couple of weeks and see if what the congressman said comes to fruition. And I believe him, and I believe it will. And I believe we can come back with a budget that puts the community at ease a whole lot better with what we need to do with serving our primary purpose as a city, and that is to keep the community safe and put our funds in public safety. So with that, again, I'll be making a motion. I'll wait for the other comments. I won't jump the gun, but I believe we should continue the item and come back in a couple of weeks with a budget that does include the funds that we will likely see immediately, the $8 million. We don't have to throw it all into the budget. We can throw what we need into it again for public safety and put the rest, towards the general fund reserve at this point. But come back with something that's going to put the public at ease regarding the safety of Citrus Heights. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I do have a couple comments. I was really encouraged when Congressman Barra spoke at our last council meeting and basically told us we were going to have no or very few limitations on how to spend the money that's coming from the federal government. Yet I'm hearing tonight from Mr. Zanoni that the updated information that we're getting from the federal government on the webinars doesn't speak the same language that Congressman Barra spoke, that we don't know that what we're going to be able to use that money for. And honestly, I agree with Brett, a budget is a projection, but you base that projection on what you know, not on what you don't know. And for us to budget money or to wait for 2 weeks for money that may not be resolved for months based on the past history of what we've dealt with during the pandemic, I don't think is prudent. We're not cutting more positions. So when we say cutting positions, we're basically budgeting for the status quo. We have the positions that we have in place now in the police department and other staff are going to stay. We are not cutting positions. We are not laying people off. We have been planning for this over the last 1.5 years to 2 years as we saw our revenues shift, and even before the pandemic started. And the reason, I don't know if it's been stated before, but it's been stated in 2x2 meetings. The reason that the police department take such a large portion of that. First of all, they're our largest budgeted department. But secondly, many of our other positions within the city can be funded through other funds where almost 100% of the police department comes out of general funds. And so that is the sad truth of why we have to look to hold the line as tightly as we do on the police department, because the police budget, it comes out of the general fund, whereas some of the other budgets, such as road repairs and other projects that we have, we can throw in salaries in those as our employees use their time to address housing, transportation, things like that. Those salaries can be paid from those grants and funds that we are awarded. So it's difficult, but I think that our staff has done as good a job as they could possibly do over a period of time. And we do need to move forward and have a budget in place. So those are my comments this evening.
Thank you. Portia, any comments?
Just a few, because I think most of it's already been addressed. But when it comes down to it, we have to be fiscally responsible and prudent. And Councilmember Bruins is correct. We cannot allow ourselves to offer false hope based on $16 million-ish that we don't know how can be applied into our budget. And I think it does more harm to our community to give them that sense of hope, and when we don't know, and then have to take it back and claw that back later on. So the best thing to do now is to pass the budget as it is, in my opinion. And then if we can make amendments and we can show a sunnier picture, we go forward and make those amendments and do that.
Thank you. And I don't have much more to add to this. One of my concerns with let's say we get a wind fill of 16 million, 8 million this year, 8 million next year. And so we fully fund the police department. And yet the revenues don't improve. Costs keep going up. We heard about insurance costs, just the cost of fuel and cars and the like are increasing. Plywood's out of this world, and construction costs are growing. So we just don't know. And if we hire to that level with 8 million and 8 million and go on a spending spree or whatever, because they say we can't put it in reserve, then in 2 years, we are actually going to have to lay people off. Fortunately, we saw this coming. We were preparing, and we let positions go vacant, whether it was an officer leaving for more pay at another department, or our assistant chief going to another jurisdiction to be their chief of police. We have those openings now. Now, Tim, if it comes in 2 weeks, that's great. I want our staff to spend some time on it, and they are very smart, very creative, and look for every avenue. So I don't expect to get a report back in 2 weeks or let's plug this in and hire officers. We just can't do this. We have to be very careful and strategic about this. I really believe that. And so with that, I think they put together a budget that'll get us through this tight spot. And if we can use the money, great. If the money is so restricted that it doesn't help us much, then this budget will get us through it and put us in a position to succeed in the future. I know there's some efforts to put money aside for replacement costs that we've never done before regularly, and also to build our reserve again. So we have the cash flow to finance some of these great road projects we've heard about. We got funding for Auburn Boulevard, but we still need cash flow to make construction payments. Now this gets reimbursed, but we don't get the money up front for roads. So there's a lot of moving parts to budget. The municipal budget, county budgets are very complex. And to get this done allows our staff to move on and work on other things. And so I don't see a value in holding off. I don't think 2 weeks will buy us anything. I don't think a month will buy us anything. And then all of a sudden we're coming up on the new fiscal year. We have to have a spending plan. Yes, it's our best guess, but we have to have a spending plan. And usually what I find, and Brett, you're correct, the numbers come in and our staff does a really good job of coming in under expenses and revenues. I mean, we're very conservative when we estimate our revenues. Hopefully they come in a little higher than we're estimating. That allows us to carry money forward or put money aside. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
I move approval of the budget as presented.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion by Bruins and a second by Middleton to adopt the city two-year budget. Amy, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bruins,
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels,
No.
Councilmember Schaefer,
No.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Aye.
Mayor Miller.
Aye. And then there's a second proposed resolution. Is there a motion for that?
Can we make comment before we take the?
Yeah, oh yeah, I think that would be appropriate, Jeannie.
So I just want to make a comment, when we first got involved with the Sacramento Economic Council, I was really leery of it. This goes back in the days prior to Mr. Boyd being our city manager, because it is a chunk of money, $34,000, just to have a membership in this and to be on the board and to participate with the Sacramento Greater Council, Economic Council. But we approved it back in that day, and we started working with them, and we have really benefited from that relationship. A lot of it is in front of us on a day-to-day basis. It's handled by staff, in particular now, Megan Huber, our economic development director. But the benefit that we have had over the years and the access to information and statistics that have helped to model or put together the model of what we want to do in the future, including our plans for Sunrise Mall, Sunrise Tomorrow, I think have been well worth the investment. And so it feels difficult under the circumstances of our budget now, but I think it is worth the investment. And so I would support us going forward to continue our participation with them with this investment. And unless there's other comments, I will go ahead and move the item for approval.
I have a comment. So my
Go ahead.
comment is just going to be that, again, the only way you vote for this resolution and to send this money out of our city is that you believe the other money's coming to our city. And if you don't believe that, then I don't understand sending money out. So with that, I'm going to support the motion because I think the organization is worthy of it. And I do believe the money is coming to us to fill that hole.
I have a question, unless anybody else has a question or comment. I have a question for the council. I know I've attended their champion program, and that's one of the points they talk about is too often cities in a region compete against each other to bring a big employer in. And the train of thought that I was taught was, let's say a big employer is going to Elk Grove, to be there from Citrus Heights saying, hey, I support that because that means some of my residents, our residents, are going to be employed down there. And it's, again, I'm not smart enough to give you the whole presentation, but, and I don't know who else are champions on this council. Who else has attended their seminar?
I have.
Anybody?
I have.
Yep.
I have.
Oh, Brett, you have? And Tim, you have? Good.
I have to.
You have too. And Portia, if you haven't, I suggest you do. It's very, just hearing him talk at the Chamber lunch in Barry Broom was the tip of the iceberg, and you get a much greater sense. And so I believe they're a partner that can really help us find that big investor. If the current owners don't want to pony up, we will find somebody who will. And I have confidence in them, and I think it's a very worthwhile. And now 35,000 is a lot. It's more than I got in the bank, but I think it's a worthwhile investment to continue with our city. And I had a motion from Councilmember Bruins. I will second her motion and call for a vote.
Councilmember Bruins,
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer,
No.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Aye.
and Mayor Miller.
Yes. Motion carries. 4-1. And with that, we can move on to the next item, please.
Next item, item number 10, the subject is Transportation Impact Study and SB 743 Implementation Guidelines. The recommendation is to review the Transportation Impact Study Guidelines and SB 743 Guidelines and adopt a resolution adopting the Transportation Impact Study and SB 743 Guidelines, finding that the thresholds of significance have been promulgated pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, Guidelines 15064.7, and determining the adoption not a project pursuant to CEQA Guidelines, Section 15060C3 and 15378.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Casey Kempenara, Planning Manager, here tonight with Leslie Boomquist, our City Engineer, and John Gard, Fair & Peers, the consultant that's helping us on this project. This project is in response to state law changes and changes in the practice and how we evaluate transportation impacts. It was timely for us to update our guidelines and then update guidelines to comply with state law. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Gard, who will walk us through this process and where we're at and highlight our guidelines as these will affect our new land development projects coming forward.
Thank you, Casey. Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfect.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sharing my screen now. One second here. Perfect. Okay, well, good evening, Mayor Miller and members of the council. Again, I'm John Gard with Fair & Peers, and as Casey mentioned, we helped the city put together a Senate Bill 743 implementation plan as well as TIS guidelines. I made a similar presentation to the one I'm going to give tonight at Planning Commission back in March. That was very detailed. I'm going to probably keep this a little bit more high level, at least initially, and if we want to dive a little deeper into technical terms and content, I'm happy to go there, but I'm going to keep it a little high level, at least initially. So the presentation consists of 10 distinct parts, which may look a little daunting, but a lot of these are knocked out in a single slide. So this may be 15, 20 minutes max that we have to cover this material. Items 4 through 9, basically, what is Senate Bill 743 and, what is vehicle miles traveled and, what are exemptions and screening maps. 4 through 9 are kind of the bulk of the presentation. And so let me just kind of continue. And most of this is going to be around Senate Bill 743 and how it's going to be implemented in the city of Citrus Heights. And then at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about why the city has transportation impact study guidelines and why they've been modified and what modifications were made. So Senate Bill 743 basically, it has, been around since the governor signed it way back in 2013, and its intent is to encourage infill development, to improve public health through active transportation, which means walking and biking, reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet, state mandates and state mandates. And if you look at the boxes below, the wheels have been in motion for almost 8 years, and the SB 743 went live statewide July 1st, 2020. So it's now a required, and that part of environmental review, the California Environmental Quality Act, is required statewide. And even though here we are in April of 2021, I commend the city because we work in a lot of different agencies and not every agency is even close to this far along. So the city's done their homework, and we're going to share what effects Senate Bill 743 actually has on the environmental review process. So what does SB 743 do? Well, it basically changes how transportation impacts are measured in the California Environmental Quality Act, specifically for land use projects. So it uses a term known as vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, as the basis of analyzing a land use project's impacts on the roadway network system. It's, you may recall, prior to SB 743, we would study intersections, level service being the standard A through F. And if things were unacceptable, we would add a travel lane or a traffic light or whatever. So level service is not permitted to be used in CEQA any longer. It's still allowed to be used in general plans, general plan policies. It can be used to identify the need for physical improvements, we'll go into a little more detail there, but basically 743 is one of the bigger changes in environmental law, at least as it relates to transportation, I've seen in my fairly lengthy career in this business. And it's really something, every city and county in the state is still grappling with, or some haven't even left the starting line, frankly. And Citrus Heights, I commend them for being where they are in terms of, at having this item tonight. So local agency concerns, I'll go through this fairly quickly, but, the biggest issue here we see oftentimes is, well, how is VMT to be analyzed? It's not easy to actually directly measure it. It's not like counting cars entering and exiting a driveway. So there's some technical challenges. Obviously, anytime you add something to CEQA something new, there's legal risk with lawsuits. And then there's often, especially in developing areas, concerns over development costs increasing. Is this just one more fee that gets charged on top of everything else? But that's a little different, for the city, given that it's built out nature. So city staff, has had a lot of decisions to make along the way. So these are several of them, as you see right here. How is VMT measured? A lot of different ways. So we work together to figure out a preferred way. We're going to get into some topics like exemptions and screening, and threshold setting, and what's a feasible mitigation if you have a VMT impact that's considered significant. What you see right here, basically the technical advisory, this is the document that the California Office of Planning and Research put out in December of 2018, and it really provides a lot of guidance on how SB 743 should be implemented at the city level. And you'll see we rely on it quite frequently as part of the implementation plan that is included actually in the staff report that you have before you. So real quick on VMT, it's basically 1 mile driven by a vehicle. It's expressed as a daily value. It's not truncated at an agency boundary. In other words, if a resident of Citrus Heights works in downtown Sacramento and drives by automobile, the entirety of that trip is counted. So VMT doesn't measure congestion and delay, but it's more a measure of efficiency of land use and roadway network enhancements. So it's kind of an efficiency metric, so to speak. This is too deep of a dive for now. So if we want to get into trip purpose types and definitions, we can do that. But the thing to take away from this is that we think about the VMT as coming from the home, at least to start with the methodology we're using here. We think about trip purposes. So on to something a little more interesting, the technical approach. So we had opportunities to weigh a couple different options with city staff for how we would analyze VMT. And one is to use a regional travel demand model. One is to use big data. And as you can see from the top right box, big data is basically anonymous cell phone records, mobile apps, and vehicle navigation that, again, the key word being anonymous here, tracks travel behaviors, patterns. And we use this, if you may recall, for Sunrise Mall to understand who's traveling adjacent to the mall, who goes to the mall, sales tax leakage, that type of thing. And so we decided that was the best use of data to apply here. And so what we've done is purchase data from a company known as Streetlight Data Incorporated. And they produce for us these metrics: average VMT per resident, per worker, and per visitor, and it's disaggregated at a census block level. And basically, let me show now, and this was for all weekdays in 2019. So this is pre-COVID data. Right now, still being in the COVID era, we don't fully know how post-COVID conditions are going to look. So most, if not all, studies right now are sort of still looking at pre-COVID conditions. So this is the city's census block group map. And there's a couple of, on the edge of the city, some block groups that are actually both in the city as well as in adjacent agencies. And this is basically the smallest unit of geographic disaggregation we can use that this data is at. And so we'll know the VMT per resident, per employee, and per visitor for each of these census block groups based on the travel that they make using these mobile devices. And per employee is important because what this is referring to is somebody who works in census block group 1362, for instance. That's their place of work. And so we have this data, and I won't get into too much of these FAQs, but in the implementation report itself, there's a lot of there's questions that people have asked over time, like, well, how do you figure out when the device is at home versus at work? And when the trip starts and stops. And if you care to get into that, we can get into that. But there's been a lot of work in this subject area. So just looking at a kind of a big picture here, what this table is showing is summarized VMT results for the city and comparing residents in the city where the average VMT per resident is 17.4 miles per day against the SACOG region average, which is 20.1 miles per day. So that's about 13% below the SACOG regional average. And workers, the view is even a little rosier, where we're at 12.8 versus 18.1. And so when we pull the streetlight data and we look at this, we look at it and compare it and evaluate it for reasonableness. We look at it against the 2018 SACOG household survey, against the 2012 California household survey, other points of data as well. And then we also think about it from a realistic point of view. The regional average has a lot of people who work in Elk Grove or work in East Sacramento or Placer that are commuting into downtown Sacramento every day. That's, the job classifications in Citrus Heights are different. So a lot of these results, and it's all written in the implementation report, clarify or provide rationale for why the results are what they are. So the city basically has chosen to follow the advice of OPR's technical advisory, which is actually based on ARB's recommendations, to use a threshold that is 15% below that of existing development. Furthermore, the city has chosen to use the entire SACOG region as the basis for that comparison. So a couple points on this. Number one, the 15% threshold is more often than not the threshold most agencies are using. Some are diverting from that for one way or another. They want to approach it a little differently, but I think attorneys will typically recommend, hiding or not hiding, but following the state guidance. And then the use of the SACOG region, this is in line with what the city of Sacramento and Sacramento County is doing. So Citrus Heights is, kind of following what its neighbors are doing in that respect. So exemptions. So when we have a proposed project, a land development project that's subject to CEQA, so there are, in the technical advisory, 5 distinct areas where there could be exemptions. Small projects, projects for high quality transit, affordable housing, redevelopment projects, local serving retail. This is basically the list. The only change that is specific to Citrus Heights is the small projects, where these are customized values based on known travel characteristics of Citrus Heights. So in other words, if a 19-unit subdivision or 32 multifamily units or 14,000 square feet of office were proposed in the city, the VMT impacts, regardless of where the project's located, would be presumed less than significant. And local serving retail is an important criteria as well. Projects of 50,000 square feet or less are also presumed significant, or less than significant, excuse me. So the other, beyond exemptions, the other area that agencies can benefit from is what's known as low VMT generating areas. So in thinking of census block groups that have low VMT based on what we measured from streetlight data. And projects with land uses similar to what's in those, projects with proposed land uses similar to what's in those VMTs, low VMT zones, are presumed less than significant. So what I'm going to show you next is basically the screening maps for the city for the 3 types, for residents, for workers, and for visitors. So this map has a lot going on. There's a lot to take in here, but the yellow highlights you see, these are the high quality transit corridors in the city, Greenback and Auburn, 4 buses per hour run along them. The crosshatched areas represent areas, census block groups that have VMT that is less than 85% of the regional average. So a project proposed in those zones will be presumed less than significant. And similarly and so basically, if you look at this area, about 50% of the census block group, of all census block groups in the city achieve this threshold. And when we look at this for reasonableness, it actually makes a lot of sense, because when we look in sort of the northeast and northwest parts of the city, we don't see the as favorable results. Well, those areas are generally further from goods and services. They may be landlocked by physical features like I-80. They're further from maybe regional destinations like downtown, whereas residential close to Sunrise Marketplace and other areas tends to do better. And then VMT for employees, again, performs really well with almost 75% of block groups below the regional average. And we talked about the reasons why that may be. But again, the results they make a lot of sense because we know what's going on in this census block group, right? This is where the medical office building is located, city hall, post office, and things like that. This may be the type of area that draws people from longer destinations, from homes to the job place. So again, these screening maps will be important for both residential and for employment type uses. And then likewise for visitor, similar type of story. Again, results make sense. Things look pretty rosy right in this area, but with the exception of these two zones, which happen to be where there's a golf course and a cemetery. Those happen to draw amongst the longest of types of trips compared to regional average. The visitor is not that much, I don't think, an issue for the city so much because, again, it's only kind of comes into play if you have a retail center more than 50,000 square feet, and Sunrise tomorrow is processed has already been processed or is in the midst of being processed, and it's covered in a different way, which I can get into if necessary, but basically I don't think the city is going to see a whole lot of plus 50,000 square foot retail centers. There may be a couple, but by and large, that exemption will help the city. So as I said, most projects in the city are unlikely to have significant VMT impacts. The possibility does exist. And unlike prior to SB 743, where we would add a travel lane or traffic light or something for a proposed level or for a level service impact, VMT impacts typically consist of use of transportation demand or TDM strategies, subsidizing transit or doing something with parking or carpool parking, that type of stuff. But we realize that that's very context specific, tenant specific, and the effectiveness is very dependent on those uses. And if the 743 implementation guideline report has a whole variety of potential TDM strategies at the city's disposal. So we've talked exclusively about land use projects. There is also a aspect of SB 743 that plays into transportation projects. And so basically if a transportation project adds capacity to a roadway that causes induced travel and more VMT, the technical advisory generated by OPR would suggest that impact would be significant. And so this is an issue a lot of cities are grappling with right now. If they're growing and they have a lot of roadway capacity projects that they're trying to avoid having to do EIR only for the cause of VMT. So not really so much an issue for the city of Citrus Heights, however, because the city is in their CIP has a variety of bike, ped, transit type facilities, complete streets projects, which are specifically listed in the technical advisories, presumed less than significant. So unfortunately not an issue to the same degree for Citrus Heights. And this is the report. I think it's on page 485 or something of the staff report. It is in there. And then real quick on the city's TIS guidelines, the city's guidelines, current guidelines date back to 2013, and they've been put together to create a comprehensive set of guidelines that allows for traffic studies prepared in the city to be high quality, consistent, transparent, of top rank. And but it is time to update it. And so the changes in basically transportation industry practices, changes in how things are done in Citrus Heights, and very notably how things have changed with SB 743 really necessitated the update to the TIS guidelines. And most notably because the guidelines previously had a lot of discussion around what do we do when we have a significant level service impact. And so that is no longer considered. But real quick on that topic. So I hear a lot of agencies ask, well, what are we going to do to keep traffic moving and that type of thing? And SB 743 doesn't preclude an agency from still looking at intersections outside of the CEQA process. And so what's in the TIS guidelines is this concept that other agencies have endorsed as well, is known as something like a local transportation analysis. And basically we just look at intersections near a project that could be adversely affected, could operate deficiently, what may need to be done to improve those. And if there are such improvements, they could be attached as conditions of approval for a project. That's what we're finding a number of agencies are defaulting to. So the updated TIS guidelines, those are also included in the staff report as well. So that is the high level version, and I'm happy to take questions.
I did have a question with the, is this in effect now? I know we're being asked to approve it for the city, but does this affect our current CEQA document with the Sunrise Tomorrow?
That's built into the EIR, Steve.
Uh-huh.
So we did factor these in as we prepared the EIR. So we compared against the existing state law, and we knew this was coming. So we also looked at that. So that will be factored.
Okay. Any other questions from council?
Good planning on our planning department's part. So if there are no other questions, I will move that we adopt the resolution as stated, that adopts the transportation impact study and the SB 743 guidelines, finding that the thresholds of significance have been promulgated pursuant to the California EIR Act as noted with the references stated in the staff report.
I heard a second. Who? Oh, Tim. All right. There's a motion by Bruin, second by Schaefer. Clerk Van, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bruins,
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Aye.
Mayor Miller.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And with that, we can move to the public hearings.
The next item is public hearing, item number 11. The subject is CARES Act Amendment Number 3 to the 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan and 2020 Action Plan for Coronavirus CDBG CV 1 and 3 funding. It is recommended that we hold the public hearing on the CARES Act Amendment and adopt a resolution adopting the CARES Act Amendment as stated in the subject.
Okay.
Good evening again, Mayor Miller, members of the City Council, Stephanie Cotter, Community Development Department. This item is to consider the third CARES Act Amendment, which incorporates the COVID-19 CDBG funding into the city's long-range plans. And this is required so the city can access these funds. As a reminder, the CARES Act was signed into law March of last year, and there was a total of $5 billion in CDBG funding available. Some of it went to states, some of it went to local governments, so there were some different allocations. Of the 3 allocations, Citrus Heights received a total of $920,000. Our first round funding, we received about $376,000, and then our round 3 funding, we received about $544,000. Citrus Heights did not receive round 2 funding because we're not a state or a non-entitlement community, and those were the only eligible recipients for the round 2 funding. So that's why there's no round 2 on there. The previous 2 CARES Act amendments, the first one was approved by Council on May 28th. This included the emergency allocations to our existing CDBG grantees and also created a supplemental Navigator fund for the Citrus Heights Navigator to access. It also authorized associated administrative costs so that it doesn't impact the city's general fund. The second CARES Act amendment was approved on August 13th of last year, and this allocated the remainder of the first round of CDBG CV funding. This went to the Renters Helpline for temporary staff and also the city's local match for the Great Place program. We followed all of the required public participation mandates from HUD, including we published a public notice in the Sacramento Bee, and we also made sure that the draft amendment was available for public review and comment. This is a public hearing, so we will also be incorporating any comments we receive tonight into the final amendment if approved by council. This proposed amendment would reallocate $91,000 in CDBG CV Round 1 funding from the Great Plates program because it's no longer needed for a local match. As was discussed during the study session, FEMA is going to reimburse the entire cost of this program, and so we no longer need to use CDBG funds for this. In addition, this amendment would allocate about $135,000 in CV Round 3 funding to eligible community support grantees and the associated administrative costs in order to relieve the general fund for the community support costs and also for administrating those programs. This is a summary of all of the allocations that are proposed within this amendment. So the first one is the Supplemental Navigator Fund, and this is moving the funding that wasn't used for Great Plates but was already authorized over to the Supplemental Navigator Fund. And then the rest of these are the community support applicants that the City Council discussed at the study session and approved funding in the budget, but with CDBG CV funding. And so this is the administrative action that would be required in order to access the CDBG funds for these applicants. If this is proposed, the next step would be to meet with the Quality of Life Committee to discuss how to allocate the remaining $408,000 in CDBG CV Round 3 funding that has not yet been allocated. So that's the city received a total of $544,000, and after this proposed amendment, we would have $408,000 remaining in CDBG CV funds. The recommendations are on the screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so first I'll take questions from council members, then open it up for any questions from the public, and then we can make comments and consider this item. So any questions from council members?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Stephanie, in regards to that $408,000, does that have to go to people or organizations, I should say, that have already submitted requests in the past and maybe we didn't fully fund them, or will this be something that new or outside organizations will be able to request?
It could be used either way, and so it would be up to the Quality of Life Committee to give us direction on, whether they prefer to look at previous grantees or if you would like to open it up to grantees that we haven't yet funded. So it could go either way.
And what's our time frame on it?
We're planning to meet with the Quality of Life Committee this month, the next month, May. And so we would hope to bring something to council for approval in June or July.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hi.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Jeannie here.
Oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
Just to ask a follow-up question to Brett's. When we go, if the Quality of Life Committee and the council determines that they're going to open it up to outside people, or even if we don't, are we going to go through an application process again, or as we typically do?
I would recommend going through an application process because it gathers the required information that we need to collect for the federal reporting guidelines, but it really is up to the Quality of Life Committee how you would like to organize that, if you want to do a request for proposals and how stringent you wanted to make the application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing. Clerk Fan, do we have any raised hands or public comment on this item?
I have not received any written comment, and I do not see any raised hands at this time.
Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing and entertain comments and a motion.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Daniels, second by Middleton. Clerk Fan, please call the roll.
Councilmember Bruins,
Aye.
Councilmember Daniels,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Middleton,
Aye.
and Mayor Miller.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item, please.
Next item is department reports, and we do have one report from the Citrus Heights Police Department.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. We wanted to acknowledge our National Volunteer Appreciation Week is this week, and we wanted to acknowledge all of our volunteers. It extends from April 18th through April 24th. National Volunteer Week is a celebration observed across the world to promote the spirit of volunteerism and to show appreciation to those who spend their time volunteering. And certainly we have many of those kind souls here in Citrus Heights who dedicate their time in not only the police department, but City Hall and our community center. We have nearly 40 dedicated, selfless, and talented volunteers and interns who generously volunteer their time to provide support in just about every unit in the police department. Their work ethic, contributions, and skill set genuinely help us each and every day to make us function as a premier police department. Of course, through the pandemic and the CDC guidelines, we had to shrink the footprint in the police department, so they've been noticeably missing over the last year because they're at home. But to show our appreciation for our volunteers and our interns, we sent them a heartfelt letter of appreciation this week from the police department. The letter was filled with comments and gratitude from our PD staff and complete with ice cream sundae coupons from Leatherby's Ice Cream here in town. We miss them terribly. We would have preferred, of course, to have an ice cream social in person, but we look forward to doing something like that when they return. During 2020, our volunteers at the police department dedicated almost 5,000 hours, and the 17 volunteers at City Hall and the community center donated almost 800 hours to the city. They do things like vehicle abatement, vehicle tows, parking and handicap citations, vacation checks, Project Lifesaver, code enforcement violation checks, radar trailer deployments, community events, and so much more. At City Hall, their 17 volunteers cover a variety of positions from receptionists, event contract management, GIS programs, and office duties. We surely look forward to bringing our volunteers back to work soon. I know they miss us as well. We hear from them quite regularly, and we just wanted to give them a shout out during National Volunteer Appreciation Week. Thank you.
Very good, Chief. We're very blessed to have the volunteers we do.
Question for the chief real quick.
Yes.
Were there any coupons left over?
Coupons?
Well, I don't think so. We might be able to find you one.
You look great in uniform tonight, Chief. If that helps.
Okay. Well, thank you for that report. And are there any city manager items?
Not this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. And we move on to items requested by council members, future agenda items. Are there any? And hearing none. Folks, we are adjourned. Have a good night. Be safe. We'll see you next meeting.